Hello there everyone, Inky Fingers here from Inky Fingers Architectural Art. Now today I'm going to be recreating, if I can, this picture here. This is a little watercolour I did some years ago now. As you can see, it's a windmill, some houses, a little bit of countryside and a boat. Painted on ash paper. But what I want to try and do today is to recreate this, but only using 4 colours, keeping an incredibly limited palette. Now what colours am I going to use for this? Well, I'm going to try French ultramarine blue, crimson alizarin, or permanent crimson alizarin in this case, azo yellow light, and I've put neutral tint. Yes, neutral tint isn't, I wouldn't class it exactly as a colour, but neutral tint is very good for darkening down, subduing any other colour. Now why have I chosen these colours? Well, looking at the picture and looking at this little colour swatch sheet I made, we can see the range of what the colours we can achieve by using these 3 colours. Ultramarine, why did I choose ultramarine? It's a nice warm blue, very nice for like an English summer sky. But because it's a warm blue, if you mix a warm blue with a cool red, you get the most vibrant violets, the secondary colour, which we could use in certain parts if you wanted to for warm shadows. Using French ultramarine with, this is azo yellow light, but it's a very, very cool greenish yellow, very akin to lemon yellow. But if you can mix ultramarine blue with a cool yellow, again you can get some nice greens, and you can still get quite a nice bright green, not as bright as if you used a cool blue such as cerulean or manganese, but you can get quite a nice light green still. And also using this colour combination you can get a nice bright orange. And interestingly enough, the roof tiles in this were obviously done with either light red or burnt sienna. I don't have light red or burnt sienna in this palette, but it just so happens if we mix crimson with azo yellow light, we get this weak looking burnt sienna, which would go very nice on the tiles. Now of course I could have used any blue, any red, any yellow, but I choose these because they look more traditional. And also if you look at the swatch again, using the neutral tint, we can see we can get some very nice cool down tones. Like ultramarine and neutral tint on its own would make a very nice cool shadow colour. You can get a nice green and sort of olive green using azo yellow light with the neutral tint. So you're very, very limited with 3 colours, but you should be able to recreate this picture here with these 3 colours. Now this is the drawing. I've tried to do it as accurately as possible to the original, but what we need to do is to simply put the outline in with a pen, as this is pen and it is going to be pen and wash, as this is. So I'm going to do the pen first, and then what I'll have to do is I'm going to have to mask out certain areas, such as the mast here and the sails on the windmill. So when I paint in the sky, I can just paint over the entire thing. And the pen I'm going to use for the ink work is the Uniball I Micro, which I've used this before. It's a black ink, it's waterproof and fade proof. It's a ballpoint pen with a 0.5mm tip, so you can get some really nice outlines. And the paper is Bockingford. Completely different paper than ash, so the appearance, the look of the paint on the paper is going to be completely different to what's on here. So this will be an interesting little experiment. So all I'm going to do with the outlining is just a very, very simple outline like this. Because this is a ballpoint pen and this is technically it's classed as rough paper, but Bockingford rough is extra rough. Bockingford extra rough is not extra rough, it's just the same as a normal rough paper. But because of its it's much smoother than this paper. We can when we draw on with this ballpoint, it absolutely flows. It's really, really nice. So we can get very nice, precise, clean lines, like as you can see. So I'm just going to do this over everything, and then I'll be back. The inking in is just about done, but what I would like to show is even as we're using a ballpoint pen that doesn't have that much variability in the line, you can still, if you hold the pen just at such a pressure, that you can get very fine tenuous lines, which this is going to be perfect for doing the hint at some slates on the house. See, it's not like these lines where they're big and bold and very distinct. These, but I am holding the pen in the long position, so I'm just basically using the side of the roller ball, and that just scrapes across this paper. We'll just do one or two little. It's just going to give the impression that there's going to be some tiles on these roofs. Like that. And also, because we're going to have lots of dark under here, lots of like reeds and such, I'm just literally putting texture in some reeds, grasses, especially where the water is edges, where you might get more. Just like that. A few little bits and bobs just on the bank itself. Same here. You just do some little, I don't know, tufts of grass or whatever they may be. Just to give a little bit of something, a little bit of texture, a little bit of detail into the grass. So when we paint it in, you've got this detailing. I've masked out, using masking fluid, everything that needs to be masked out. That's the sails, the top of the dome. I've masked out these two chimney pots, and I've masked out the windows and this sail. But I've also, with the pen, I've put in window panes just with the black, and I've put a lot more detailing with grasses and such in the grass. So we've got, as I said before, we've got the texture. So now we need to put the sky in. Now I'm going to try and mimic the sky, and when we look at our little palette, we don't have much choices. So of course it'll be ultramarine blue. We'll leave some of the clouds, and I may attempt to put a little bit something underneath the clouds, a little bit of a tone. It may be just some ultramarine and neutral tint, just to give that ever so slight dark tinge under the tint under the clouds. So what I have to do first is I'm going to dampen off the entire sky area. I could do this on dry paper, but because Bockingford doesn't really have much of a grain, I'd rather have quite a soft sky, because it's going to be a lot more sharper in the foreground. So I'll just put this all along here. All we need here is some blue. Now you see it's very blue. Far too blue. So I'm going to stick in, I think, a touch of crimson. It's just going to take that slight blueness off, and I think just a tiny bit of the neutral tint, just to knock it down a bit so we don't have that harshness. And you can see now the difference. I'm using a nice big squirrel mop brush, and I'm just going to paint the sky in. Now I want to see if I can get some of this blue sky over the masked areas, because the masked areas are going to be white, so we want some dark against the light. I will go into some of this pure ultramarine blue just to tint it with a different colour, so it's not just a one colour. We'll put some that over there, because that's going to be white sill. And then to the damp brush, I'm just going to pull that over and across, just so it's a little bit lighter at the bottom. I'm just going to drop a little bit of the pure ultramarine here and there. Again, just so we've got a little bit of variability in the colour. And I've just mixed up a little bit of the neutral tint in with the blue, as I said, and I'm going to attempt to put a little bit of darkness under this cloud. Just soften it off a tad. And I think that will do for the sky. You don't want to mess around too much, because it's Bockingford. It will blobble around a bit. It's as I said, it's nothing like this paper. Now while the sky's drying, we can at least go into the rooftops. Well, as I said in the beginning, it looks like this picture we used burnt sienna, but we don't have burnt sienna in our limited palette, so we can use crimson and azo yellow light. That should give this sort of terracotta type color. So if we take some of the alizarin crimson, like so, and then take some of this azo yellow light, we just need to get it in the right order, and you can see now that it is starting to go. This very sort of terracotta, quite a bright terracotta colour, but it's a terracotta colour. Now we can knock that down a little bit by just putting in a tiny little bit of the neutral tint, and that's just going to knock it down ever so slightly. So I'm going to use this colour. I'm just going to put a very simple wash over these roofs here, and we can see it does actually make a very nice roof colour. So just slap it on, just a flat wash, and we've just got enough to complete that roof. So now that's done, the sky's still wet, so we can't do this. We can go into this green. Now again, the greens, we are limited because of the colours we've got. So we can have a nice mid green. We can make that darker with a bit more blue. We can have a nice yellowy green, Of course, we can make that brighter by putting a little bit more yellow in. And by this azo yellow light and a bit of neutral tint, which can give us quite a nice sort of olivey green. So yes, it's not going to be as vivid probably as this grass, but it's still going to give us a good variation of colours. This is the first green I've mixed. See, it's quite a nice light green. That's the azo yellow light first, and then a little bit of ultramarine blue. Now we need sort of like a mid green. So a mid green, we could put again some azo yellow light as a primary, then put some blue in, ultramarine blue. Just want to make sure I have enough. So there's the azo yellow light going in first, then mix in some of the blue, and we can get ourselves all the way a mid-tone green. And then finally we want a dark green. So dark green is going to be the blue first, and then the yellow. And we've got this lovely dark green. Now we could stick a little bit of the red, just a touch, and that's going to make it even darker because of course red and green are complementary colours. So there we go, we've got a light green, a mid green and a dark green. So all we need to do is to go into the light green, and I'll do this field here, and in the sort of distance I shall stick a little bit of the light green along here. See if I can dry brush a little bit out. I don't want to go over this because that's going to be a blue sail. Dry brush some of this over there into the mid green. Just drop some in. Maybe it could be a bit stronger actually. Put it in, go into the dark green, and then stick some of this dark green in the foreground. Just blend it up into the sort of mid distance there. And then we'll have to let that dry off a bit. Not completely dry, because I would like to put some of this colour back in when it's just slightly damp. So we can get a little bit of the dark green with a small brush along here, just so it's not so flat. Give it a bit of variability. Right, I'm just looking at this and at an angle. It's still quite damp here, but up here looks like the shine is starting to go off. So now I could maybe with a very small brush put a little bit of extra tone and colour up into the grass here. Now all I've done here is I've mixed up a bit more colour into this so it's a little bit stronger. With a small brush, just drop a little bit here and there, just so comes out a little bit, fades out into the wet or damp wash. And hopefully it's going to look like little clumps and tufts of grass. I'll put it here. Let's be brave and try this darker wash. I suppose that could be a little bush if you do it large enough. Now I'm going to put a little bit of neutral tint into this dark green and just drop a little bit on, just again right on the shoreline. because I suppose being on the actually on the shoreline, this part is a little bit damp, a bit wet, and wet things can be a little bit darker. So now what we can do is we've got the distant trees here, and we've got some trees inside of the mid distance. So we've got the colours there. We don't need to change anything. For the distant trees, the bluey trees, we can use this nice recessive colour. All we need to do there is, with a nice soft brush, I'm going to put something like that. Now I'm going to go halfway down, or maybe it's just a bit farther, and then I'm going to damp off the brush and soften that bottom off. Just so it doesn't look like it. We've got this basically like a cardboard cutout going right down to the ground. But what we want this is dark up there and it goes down into a faded area. I think it just separates that from that, and then we'll go into this mid distance color and we shall be careful not to put our hands on it. Now these railings are masked out. The chimney pot is masked out. So that goes there. We put some, and then I'm going to go with a small brush into the dark. I'm just going to put a little bit of, maybe it's about there, just a couple of little dots and dashes, just to make it look like it's got a little bit of shadow into this tree or trees. Now while we're waiting for this to dry, we can of course go into the walls. Now what colour can we have the walls in our very limited palette? The walls here are more like a browny colour. So how can we mix a browny colour, brownish type colour, with the colours we've got here? Well, a typical way of mixing brown is one to have dirty water in the first place, but that can't be helped. Is by mixing, we make red first. In this case, it's got to be our crimson. Some yellow. That's going to make this sort of terracotta type colour, the colour we used for the roofs. And then to darken all this down, we can stick a little bit of the neutral tint in, and lo and behold, that starts to give us like a brownish colour. Now that might be a bit too brown, so I'm going to stick a little bit more yellow in there, which will lighten it back up, and there we go. A little bit more water, so I don't want it too dark, and that looks like it might make a nice substitute for the colour we've got on this original. So all we need to do here is just paint in just a flat wash over everything here. I won't do the dog because I don't know what colour to do it yet. So we have these now nice brown-ish coloured walls. Now I think I'm going to maybe put a little bit more blue into this, just to make a darker brown. Maybe it's a bit too much, but and I want to, in the shadow areas, or where the areas where the sunlight ain't going to be. I just want to drop a few little to make them a little bit darker. We will have a shadow colour on this at the end of the day. Right, so once again, this is totally wet, so we can't do anything up there, but we can go down to the boat and we can paint in the boat. Now the boat we can paint in any colours we like. So this is blue, so I'm just going to keep it the same, and I'm going to paint this bottom part in a nice blue colour. And of course the blue has got to be French ultramarine. Now the people, they've got, looks like in this photograph or in this picture, I've got is orange, so it looks like they're wearing some life jackets. So orange, what can we have? Well, of course we all know the colour theory. Orange, we can have azo yellow light and crimson, which will give this nice orange. We'll have one of the brighter oranges. We could have done it the other way and have it more of a duller orange, but we'll have a nice bright orange. So we'll just put a little bit. Now one thing we need to do, I mean, all the masking fluid's dry, all this is dry, is to put a tone, a colour onto the windmill itself. So this looks like a brownish colour, so I'm just going to put a similar type of colour. Now all this is again crimson alizarin, yellow azo yellow light, to make that sort of terracotta type colour, and then I added a little touch, just a touch, a speck of ultramarine blue, just to make a slightly different type of brown, and then I put a touch of neutral tint in, and that makes this quite nice little brown. So I'm going to paint that like so, and then I'm going to put a little bit more blue in. I'll make it a bit more cooler. May as well go over that dark. And this is now given us the basis of our SMI's brick built windmill. So now it's all dry, and we can see on the windmill we've now got a nice sunny side going on to a dark side. It does need some shadow on there though. I've taken the masking fluid off all this area apart from this sail here, because I'm going to leave the masking fluid on there, so when I put the shadow on I'm not going over the actual sail itself. But what we can do is now put this the washers for the water. So we, of course, we can see we've got this blue with various shades of other colours in it to make it look a little bit like water. So of course the only blue we can have is French ultramarine, but so we're going to have to knock it down a little bit, at least to match something like what we've got in the sky here. So that's of course French ultramarine and just a touch of neutral tint. Now luckily I already have the colour which I used for the sky, so I shall just use that. I'm going to use a largish brush, a squirrel mop, and because when we're doing water we do it horizontally to make it look flat. Now I'm going to try and leave some dry brush. Pretty difficult on this paper. Or at least leave some little white flecks here and there. We may go over them when we put another wash on. We go over this individual here. Flick it across, see if we can get this is what we want, this speckled look. So we got something like that. Now this is going to be white. This part of the boat's going to be white, so as it's going to be in shade, I'll just stick this part in shade. So we can see we've got this nice light blue with some dry brush areas in. Now we need, while it's damp, we need to go into this green, our green here, because we've got a little bit of reflection from the bank. So using the same brush, haven't changed the colour, it's still got some of the blue on. I'll just see if we can get a little bit. It's pretty dry along there now, so we're not going to get much sort of blending in. We'll stick a little bit of dark. Just sort of down there. Now we go back into the original wash I've just put on, and I'm going to just again go over it and try and get some ripples. A little bit more dry brush here and there. And we'll let that dry off a little bit. But one thing I will do again with this colour, just change the brush. I'm going to put, because this is white, I'm going to put a wash of this shadow colour over this area where it will be in shadow. So we'll have a sunlight area and a shadow area. Now while this is dry, I'm going to go back into the ground, and with the darker of the green, might have to be a little bit darker, we'll soon see. I'm just going to put a little bit more green in the foreground here. Just blob it around, blob it on. And I'm just going to put a few little blobs here and there. See, it's not too dark, so it doesn't, it's not like stands out like a sore thumb or anything. Just covering it up, making a little bit more tonal values here and there. And then I think finally, with this small brush, in with the same colour I've used for this darker area of blue, I'm just going to put a few little ripples here and there. Okay, it's all dry. You've got some nice tones in the river now. Now I'll have to put in the shadows. Now the shadows, we have a choice. Do we have some nice sun-baked shadows, which would be quite nice? Sun-baked, I mean violet. So the violet we'd have to have is, of course, ultramarine blue and crimson. And that's going to make something like that, a lovely, lovely, lovely shadow colour. If that is a little bit too warm, there we go. If that's a touch too warm, then what we can do to knock it down, we could add a touch of neutral tint, or we could just do the traditional way and add a touch of yellow, because of course, we've made violet by mixing blue and red, the two secondaries. Now you mix a violet with using the two of the primary colours. To knock it down, to grade off, you have to add the third primary colour, which in this case would be yellow. And the only yellow we've got is a yellow light. This will start to change it quite rapidly. As you can see now, it's violet, but it's not as violet as that. So I'm going to try this colour. So what have we got? We have this area. All this area is going to be in shadow, all the way down, all the way down there, all the way over these arm railings, because they are of course masked out. And what we need to do now is to just, with a bit of clean water, just a damp brush, and just get this to blend in. So it looks like it's going to be sort of round, circular. You need to blend this in here. Drop a little bit more in. And then everything else away from the sun will also have to be in shadow, so that means all of this. Now we've got some shadows on, but I want to give the foreground a little bit more texture, so I'm going to splatter this with a bit of paint. And that's now give us an instant field of texture. And also the sails are a little bit too white, so you can use the shadow colour, a small brush, and just put a little bit of shading where obviously the sun doesn't shine. Maybe there's a touch of white ink. Just here and there where it's actually darker on the paper for the in the shadows on the river, so we can put a few little white ripples. Perhaps a few little bits of splatterings with some white ink, diluted white ink. It could be some flowers, daisies, whatever, some crimson splattering. Could be wildflowers. And then lastly, a white pen, because we have to put at least an indication of some white window frames. So now to finish it all off, I've just been, with the pen again, I've just been very lightly, as you can see, doing some hatching on the shadow areas. Extremely fine. It just gives that little bit of texture. From a distance, you probably won't even be able to see it. It is there. And there we are, that's a finished picture. Same subject, different colours, multi-coloured palette, very limited coloured palette. Rag paper, Bockingford. Now they don't look too dissimilar. This limited palette is much brighter in colour because of the colours we had to use. The greens are brighter. We've still got lots of texture, just like this picture. Perhaps we could have a little bit more pen work on the boat, just to give it a little bit more dynamics, because it is quite in the foreground, just like this one. But I think this was done with, if I remember, a dipping pen. This was done with the rollerball pen. So there would be quite a difference. But in all, with just a couple of colours, we can do a pretty reasonable picture. So why don't you try giving a picture a go? Just pick your 3 primaries. We've got plenty of reds, blues and yellows to choose from, but perhaps stick in a neutral tint, just so you've got that extra scope to darken colours down if you need it. And with that, I say goodbye, and I'll see you next week. So goodbye.